So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's, as I just said, but for the purpose of the recording, our first ever landscape photography live photo critique with our landscape master, Nigel Forster. I know you're there in the wings, bud. How are you?
I'm well, Jay.
It's our weekly
Keeping
Tuesday
well.
chat.
It is. It is.
But do you know what? It's one of the things I've looked forward to. But you know I'm a fan of the landscape
Oh, good.
photography.
I don't know how much that says about your life, Jay, but never mind.
No, I look forward to it. I love landscape photography. Yeah, I'm going to say it. You're my favourite teacher on the academy. Just don't tell the others.
Whoa! Right.
But no, you've kept me company through this
Yeah.
this unprecedented time, and I've enjoyed it. And so have the members, which is great. So I got to thank you
Good.
for that.
That's a good thing.
So look, we always do it, especially for anybody that's new. We get you to tell them a little bit about yourself before we get into tonight's images. So if you just want to give us that quick rundown on your journey into landscape photography, and then we'll get the show and the go.
Okay. Yeah, I've been working as a photographer for 10, 11 years now. So it's just something I've done all my life. I've had a sort of very varied background, from running a charity to being an architect to being a photographer. I suppose my photography combines a lot of my sort of personal and professional interest, really. Based in the Brecon Beacons, a little village called Talabonsanusk, which some of you might know, about 40 miles north of Cardiff. A lot of my early photography was based around there. Since then, I've expanded to cover quite a lot of the country. I run workshops as well, workshops and one-to-ones, and I run those all over the country as well. And hopefully we'll be able to recommence those reasonably soon. Let's see how that goes. I've started teaching since about 2010, joined the academy in about 2011, both doing the online training, the online videos, and more recently the series of webinars. Well, I've probably considerably number more webinars than training videos. So yeah, been with the academy for quite a while, and done most of their landscape work.
Brilliant. No, you have. You've done pretty. Yeah, you have. You were on. Yeah, we worked it out. Almost 10 years. We'll have a party for you now soon. Brilliant. As you mentioned, obviously, yes, we're hoping. We still don't know, but when you'll be able to get back to the actual physical workshop size. But we shouldn't forget, obviously, you've got your online tuition as well, and your one.
Sure. Yeah.
So you can see the link on the screen there.
And the web links on there.
Yeah, and we'll, as I said, we'll get that. You can find Nigel's links from our Facebook page as well, plus the follow-up email that you get from us tomorrow. So as I said at the beginning, in case you missed it as we were logging in, we've had a fantastic set of images uploaded for tonight's critique. They're all anonymous, but more than we expected. So we're going to make sure everybody's images are critiqued. So I'm going to show them in the order they were uploaded by yourselves. And then what we will do is where we get to tonight, I'll record, what images we've done, and we are already planning to continue this next week. We don't want anybody cut short. We don't want anything sort of just sped over to rush through them, especially seeing this is our first, and obviously you've done it. So thank you. The images are great, brilliant that you've all taken part, which is fantastic. So I think that's the fairest we can do. Questions at the end, please. So put them through, any questions you do have for Nigel, but we'll keep them to the end so we can get a massive chunk of these going through. So, and Nigel, you asked for them to be, so you haven't seen them prior to, I did ask you if you wanted to.
So I haven't seen any of them. And one thing I need to point out as well, I've not seen or had access to the EXIF data. So technical information on them is going to be probably quite limited because of that. So I'll largely obviously concentrate on composition, lighting, that kind of thing, the effect of the image rather than anything technical.
Absolutely brilliant. There was a couple I could see from the data on the upload. It was one image per person, so there was a few people that submitted more than one image. So what I've done is I've kept the first image that you've submitted, and I have removed the others just to make it fair on everybody that's submitted. Right, Nigel.
There is one other thing worth pointing out as well, Jay, is that just because it's my position, my opinion, it is only a judgment and an opinion, doesn't mean I'm always right. Photography is a very subjective thing, and different people have different views on it, no matter who they are. So, I'm only just going to be expressing an opinion and hopefully accentuating the positives.
Absolutely, brilliant, love it. Okay, well, look, let's get going. So, image number 1. Okay, there we go. Got the castle.
Ooh, right. Is that one of the 3 castles in the Abergavenny area, sort of Monmouthshire area? I think it is. Maybe wrong. It is. Yeah, right. Lovely light. and definitely caught the light correctly. It's obviously coming from looking at the shadow, coming from the right-hand side of the image. So the light's well caught. One thing possibly, and it's really hard to tell unless you've got access to the exact positioning, is that the more or all potentially of the reflection of the castle could have been caught if the photographer had moved a little bit more to the right. And generally these kind of images work on the whole much more strongly if you've got reflections are very powerful things, obviously reflecting both the castle and the sky. So but I'm saying that without knowing whether in fact the photographer was able to get to a position where you could actually do that. Perfectly possible they couldn't. Obviously taken in summer, there's quite a lot of vegetation around. Often winter light can work quite well because the vegetation is less pronounced and might not get in the way so much. One thing I would say about the post-processing, the reflection seems to have quite a lot of image noise in it, or something's going on down there. I'm not quite sure what that is. So whether it's worthwhile the poster putting it back into whatever, whether it's Photoshop or whatever image processor was used, and just check on that, because it looks to be, the coloring looks to be quite different. Any comment, Jane? Oh, right, you're just moving on. Okay, so right, okay, so
sorry, this is for us, mate.
Yeah,
so you finished on that one?
Right. So yeah, so there's no feedback, of course, in between the images.
No, we'll keep
it just run from the other.
You go for it, mate.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Right. Okay, this is more obviously of a telephoto shot. Interestingly framed by the trees. Couple of things I probably point out. Generally, dark toned foregrounds tend to draw the eye into the frame more strongly than light toned foregrounds, which catch the eye. So if there's a possibility within the black and white conversion of going for a different tonal processing, which you can do, you've got full control over tones in black and white from light to dark throughout the whole color range, then I'd have probably turned that foreground darker, which drew the eye more into the picture, possibly with some vignetting a little bit more at the edges as well, the top and the edges, just to draw the eye into the frame. It is fairly central positioned, which isn't in itself an issue, but generally with central positioning, if you can use the surroundings and edges of the frame to take the eye into the picture, generally you produce a more powerful picture. Have noticed also the image is slightly, it is centrally positioned, but slightly off center. On the whole, and I'm probably going to use on the whole quite a lot, because as I mentioned at the start, a lot of these things are down to personal judgment. Either put something in the middle, right in the middle, or more of an off center, or more off center, which gives it more context. So having said that, with this one, you do have a sloping foreground, and the sloping foreground does tend to draw the eye downwards. So in that respect, actually on slight off center to the left is not a bad position. Might play around with the positioning of it. Finally, be worth seeing the color version as well. Often it looks like a brick chimney stack. Brick chimney stack probably is going to have interesting coloring as well, and the color version might be interesting to see too. Particularly if it's a nice sort of reddish color which contrasts well with the surroundings.
Brilliant, mate. Okay, so I'm interested to see what you're going to say about this one, because it's similar to some of the things we've been talking about lately.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I like this one. And my instant reaction is it was a black and white version as well. I like the low viewpoint, setting the tree up against the sky. Might on this one give the sky maybe even try maybe you couldn't get it, you can get lower and get as much trunk of the trunk of the tree as possible against the sky. The same point applies to the brightness of the foreground as well. Again, I'd probably tone that down a little bit. The weight of the sky is quite strong. Color balance is slightly adrift. It could do what you can do in Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw. There's an auto white balance tool. If you click on the gray of the sky, a neutral or any neutral tone, in this happens, the grey of the sky will work fine, then that will neutralize the image. It looks like quite warm at the moment, and I think that grey effect will work quite well. But as I mentioned, also I think it would work quite strongly in black and white, particularly with the foreground being quite textural. These kind of lone tree images tend to add quite a lot of atmosphere if you and look almost more abstract and sculptural, with a bit more sort of mood and drama to them, if you turn them to black and white. So I don't know whether the person who submitted it has tried a black and white version, but I definitely tried. But certainly check that color balance, because it does look quite warm at the moment. Positioning of the tree could go central or a little bit further to the left-hand side to open up the sky a bit. That would give it a little bit more context. Again, a bit like the previous one. There's no real wrong or right about this, but often worthwhile playing with the position of the tree. But yeah, a strong image.
Brilliant. We have, interesting, you mentioned reflections early on. There's quite a few in tonight, so it'd be interesting what we make of them. Next one for you anyway, bud.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, taking all this. I wonder where this was taken. Yeah, nice shot. Guess it's a reasonably long telephoto lens, but it's difficult to say exactly, isn't it? Really nice shot. I, on the whole, tend to doesn't mean it's right. My approach to reflections usually is to put the horizon line in the center of the frame, rather than a third up, as in this case. That's more of a wish in my part to get the full effect of the reflection in the image, and you tend to increase the abstract effect if you do that. Having said that, in this case, the deer in there? In the water, does mean that the image is not quite a mirror image reflection anyway, and I can see why the photographers place them in that position. They are mostly facing out of the frame, and that's the way they were, of course. Again, bit of a play around with different positioning. Maybe have them more to the left, so they're facing into the frame rather than perhaps out of the frame as well. And I'd certainly have tried a wider shot, possibly a wider panoramic format shot, to capture the strength of the reflection in the image. Even perhaps cropping the top of the trees, possibly. I can see there's quite a few crops which will work in this picture. In processing, one thing I would definitely do is boost the contrast. Looks quite as though the contrast is quite flat. Either using dehaze or simple contrast, or white, or increasing blacks would help on this. Yeah, a bit of a boost in contrast wouldn't go amiss. It's slightly the effect has slightly dulled the effect of the colours. So strong image. Few things to think about, both in terms of composition and in terms of the post-processing element of it as well.
I've got to chip in just before we do it, but it wasn't just me that was thinking it. Perfect that the two white birds are almost
I was just at that point though, they're always symmetrical, aren't they? I was wondering how this delivered. It was only when I finished talking I picked up the fact that those two are absolutely symmetrical on either side of the image, which may of course have something to do with the framing.
You'd never get it twice, would you? Exactly. Yeah, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, no, it's worth pointing out.
Or they're well trained, absolutely right. Brilliant. Okay, so we've got a bit of a coastal one for you now, bud.
Okay. Yeah, coastal's hard. Coastal's hard from the tops of this is Seven Sisters, isn't it? No, it's not Beachy Head because there's no lighthouse. Ooh, I'm sure it's Seven Sisters there. Yeah, nice image. I like the view, like the distant view. Certainly, it's very strong atmosphere behind the cliffs, yeah, very prominent sort of White Cliffs south coast. Whether that's Seven Sisters or not, however, tops of cliffs are really hard because what you do, you tend to get most of the image on one side of the picture. One advantage this image does have, though, is the fact that the coastline curves around, and that helps fill the frame. I'd have experimented with the foreground a little bit. I think that grass bank, which obviously forms the grass slope, which forms the foreground, cuts across the bottom, generally something which cuts across the bottom of the frame at an angle is difficult to manage compositionally. It would work much more strongly if it perhaps swept back on itself and took the eye round into the image. But of course, if that isn't the shape of the foreground, it's not possible to do that. But it's always worthwhile, if you're in this kind of location, seeing how you can use the foreground as a more positive contribution to the image rather than something that tends to counteract against it. Possibly moving towards that the chalk cliff in the middle ground, trying to see what you can do with that foreground which cuts back on itself. Might be something you have to do with it. You can do with that, but unless you're there, it's really hard to tell that. But that's the one thing. You almost want that distant sweeping view to be uncluttered, because the strength of that image is in the shape and form of the bay in the background. So on the whole, I've tried to open up that bay a bit, gone forward, tried to utilize that bit of landscape in the middle ground rather than the grass bank in the foreground. Is it a long exposed shot? Oh, is that smoothed out water? Could be. It's difficult to tell. Yeah, nice. I like the way the sky merges into the water. Nice colouring of the image. Yeah. Do you recognise the location, Jay?
No, I don't. No.
Because I'd say the strength of the bay. I mean, it looks like the Sussex coast, but I can't see a lighthouse.
I know. A little building on the top, isn't it? But that's not. Yeah, no, don't know.
There is, isn't there? It's not church or something.
I think they're the agreement. They think you're right. A few people have said they think it is Seven Sisters.
But there's no lighthouse unless it's hidden behind the rock. And Seven Sisters does not have a church on the top of the hill.
Ah, okay. Oh, there we go. Hang on a minute. That is Beltroot in the background. Does that make any sense? Beltroot?
No.
Beltout?
No.
Don't know. Right. Next one anyway.
Okay. Okay. So, I mean, is that a thorough enough analysis? The one thing possibly is quite.
It's okay. I'll go back.
Right, a little bit of dead space on the left-hand side. I probably crop that slightly to draw the eye. Again, to crop it maybe to a square crop to draw the eye more to the sweep of the bay. It is one of those where I would think, my old question, why am I taking this picture? The reason I'm taking this picture, the strength of the curve of the bay, and therefore, to my mind, everything in the image should be about accentuating and bringing that to the attention of the viewer, the strength of the curve in the bay.
Brilliant. Okay, so there we go. There's the next one for you.
Know this spot. Trottenish Ridge on Skye. It's actually taken from the Kerrang, isn't it? Yeah, lovely shot, lovely light. It's a location I know well, yeah, what can I say? It is what it is. It's taken in. I think the black and white conversion works well. Nice light effect and nice cloud detail as well, overlooking the ridge. I like the fold. It's one of those classic receding layers shots that you tend to get with a longer focus lens, where you get the whether it's taken in misty or hazy light, that you get this receding effect from front to back. So, and a few crops would work well with this as well. You could almost do a sort of square or standard shot. I noticed the obviously the person who's submitted it has gone for a wider view, which equally gives it context and scale as well, and space. So I kind of like that as well. You could, if you were nitpicking, you could possibly say that the light tone sky on the top left of the picture detracts slightly, because light tones always draw the image. Having said that, it is what it is. A crop of that, if you crop that out, would start to get a bit tight close to the top of the mountain. So it's quite going to be, it will be quite hard to both to get the darker tone throughout the whole of that image and crop it from the top. Obviously you can crop it square to crop that part of the image out. Then again, you lose the context, and sometimes you have to work with what you've got. But yeah, lovely image. Looks on my screen quite a shade bluish, but that may be my screen. That's perfectly possible. Don't know what it looks like at your end, Jay. And I'd probably neutralize it to a neutral tone if it is, but it could be my screen.
No, I think you might be right. But well, just to be clear as well, guys, normally, because obviously I'm working remotely, unfortunately at the minute, I would be doing them on a calibrated monitor. I'm sure Nigel is, but Nigel's just seeing obviously the web, the got a webinar broadcast. But I think there is a slight tinge in that, Nigel. I think you're right.
There's a tinge in it, isn't there?
Yeah. So
which can be good, by the way. But if it's a tint, maybe make it a bit stronger. You know, it's a bit of a kind of.
Well, the gentleman has just chipped in saying that there is a blue tint in there. Anything for effect. Okay. There we go. Brilliant.
No, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, sure. What I would say to the contributor, maybe strengthen the blue tint a bit and make a feature of it. Maybe do something with it. It's just a thought.
Brilliant. Thank you, mate. So we're staying with the beach. We got some waves.
Yeah. This does go back to my mind. I know I repeat it quite often. The old maxim of why am I taking this picture? The person who took this picture was primarily, I assume, taking it because of the wave coming in. So what there is instead is a lot of foreground, which, without being totally dead space, because there is some texture in it, it's not, in my mind, the strength of the image. So two ways of handling this is either obviously to go closer to the wave, in which case the wave will appear big in relation to the background, or zoom in from the current position, in which case you get a stronger relationship between the wave and the mountains behind, and you'll increase the scale of the mountains behind relative to the wave. So I would also possibly, because you've got the two main features that strengthen them are the wave and the mountains, move a little bit to the left, which places the wave in closer proximity to the mountains within the image. At the moment, you've got the mountains largely on the right-hand side and the more interesting wave effect, but I appreciate that changes. I think that wave will be in a different position with whichever wave that comes in relative to the mountains. But the main thing, I think, is managing the foreground, because focusing on, clearly it was the wave and the backdrop that caught the eye. So how can you make that image work more successfully when relating, one, the scale of the wave, and two, their relationship with the mountain backdrop?
Brilliant. Great. Love it. Okay. So we're staying with the coast. A bit more clouds and some light for you this time.
Is this one not quite sharp?
I don't think it is.
I think there's a bit of camera shake on this one. Unless looking at the buildings there, they don't look 100%, do they?
No, it's not sharp. Obviously, I've got the broadcast monitor. It's not sharp. No, it's no.
Okay, right. Leaving that aside, someone taken on Sky as well. I think I recognise that spot. I may be wrong, but I think that's on Sky too. Yeah, the interest is on the shafts of light and the openness of the landscape. There's probably compositionally not an awful lot of difference I would do with this. It focuses largely on the sky, That's where the light interest is. It is quite hazy, but that's the light conditions, and you can tell there's an element of little shafts of light coming from the sky onto the landscape, probably slightly widen the view to get the whole effect, because you've got something of those rays into the on the left hand side, which is going out of the image. Yeah, so to my mind, probably zoom out a shade, maybe more of a panoramic format from left to right, which takes in the wider landscape. But that's a bit of an individual judgment, really. I mean, on this kind of shot, you know, a fair number of compositions can work okay. I like the positioning of the landscape in relation to the sky works well. You can, if you're really careful, accentuate the effect of the rays a little bit in post-processing. At the moment, they're a shade lost in haze. Certainly, there is the potential, I think, to bring a little bit more of the clarity of the image out. So if you add a bit of clarity, add some dehaze in there, I think that the image will have more punch. But obviously, the main thing is sharpness. It does look like camera shake to me. I can see two images in there.
Okay, well, thank you. Here we go. I'll just move them on.
Ooh,
another tree.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, like this one. I have nothing to add. It's great.
When I was downloading them earlier on today, it just jumped out at me. I loved it.
Great shot. Great shot. Everything about it. Love the central positioning of the tree. I love the way it frames the birds on either side. Yeah, I have. And the shafts of light behind it, very happy to have that one in my portfolio. I have nothing to add. Perfect. In black and white, does it brilliantly as well.
Brilliant, nicely done. Well done, whoever that is. It's one of those images, isn't it? It was one of those images that I wish was mine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah.
Great.
Love it. Excellent.
The panoramic format works well as well. It's an awful lot of thought's been gone into that. Very well captured, brilliantly done.
Excellent. Okay, so we've got some of our Welsh residents in this one for you.
Okay. Okay, I've gone for a sepia tone, obviously. Yeah, there's quite a lot going on in this one. Right, now, what would I do? It's obviously, it's got the wonky tree stands out quite a lot, doesn't it? The main relationship in the image is the relationship between the sheep and the distant, almost looks like this very large house, whatever it is, farmhouse, stately home, whatever it is. So that relationship is probably more important than anything in the image. The tree, which is a very sloping tree on the side of the bank, certainly does dominate, and it's difficult. It would work more strongly without that tree, but clearly it's there. And relationship to where the sheep are, very difficult to get the tree out of the shot. If you imagine the image without the tree, then the other trees form a more effective lead-in into the landscape. So if the photographer walked forward a bit, the sheep normally would walk away, and therefore what you get is the sheep with just those two trees, and on the left-hand side, with the trees and the house still in the building, which to my mind would form a stronger composition. However, sheep, of course, are very unpredictable creatures, and who knows which direction they'd run in. But they'd certainly run somewhere if you walk forward. But I would probably have looked at it and thought, okay, the left-hand side of the image as it stands isn't doing a lot for it. And I would probably have tried to walk forward a bit, see if I could get the sheep with the trees on the left staying in the image, leading towards the house on the right. I'm not a fan of sepia. I have to say, I'm not a fan of sepia. So that's just a personal view, of course. So to my mind, it would probably be a black and white.
Brilliant. Thanks, mate. I think, well, we've definitely got a long exposure now, haven't we?
Certainly have. This one's a couple of minutes. Yeah, it'd be interesting to know which bit of do I recognise this coastline?
You've been around, you have, boy.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to pick it out without. There's a bit of old harbour or construction on the far right hand side. Be interesting to know from the person who contributed where it's taken from. I like this one anyway. Yeah, nice. Nice water flow. The long exposure certainly picked out the flow of the water. It was obviously fairly sort of fairly turbulent sea. So that included a lot of spray. I guess, look, without knowing the wind speed, there's probably a minute or two in this, isn't there? Looking at the cloud movement. But nice sweeping effect. I'm in two minds about the foreground. Having said that, I'm generally one for where I can, having a foreground running across the entire frame of the image, or not having it at all and just having it open. Having said that, I can see that this foreground on the bottom right is counteracted by the landform on, sorry, bottom left, I beg your pardon, counteracted by the landform on the right-hand side. So I can see there's quite an interesting dynamic through the frame from left to right and then left again to the island of the background. So I can see that kind of flow through the frame working quite well. In post-processing, I'd probably do a little bit of vignetting on this one. I think I'd probably vignette the bottom right-hand corner, just draw, and the center of the sky at the top, there's a lighter area as well. So I'd probably vignette it on all the sides just to draw the eye into the frame, which would accentuate the sweeping effect of the water. But yeah, a nice image. Be interested to know where it's taken.
Brilliant. Well, if they're with us, maybe they'll pop it in the question panel for us.
And the black and white on this, generally, these kind of subtle tones work quite well in black and white as well.
Well, we're going back to black and white now, mate. So let me just move it on. Oops. There we go.
Right. Okay. Ooh, this is a hard one. Quite a few things catch my eye on this one. And it's a different style of picture because this is more of a sense of place. It contains all the elements that you would see in a derelict barn, the fence, the old fence, the gate, the landform beyond, the trees, and it's quite starkly processed as well. It's quite contrasty. So I think that's been done deliberately to add to that sort of that moody, characterful effect. Compositionally, conventionally you'd say, okay, there's quite a lot in there. That the foreground of the way the focus of the image is the barn, its relationship to the background of the sky. Therefore, do you want that foreground of the fence line running across it? Conventionally, probably not. And I'd probably take a version that didn't include that. Having said that, I can fully see why the photographer's included, because it adds to that sense of place I've been talking about. And I can think that's why the photographer's taken it. And in that respect, it's very, very successful, because it does do that sort of, the fence line creates depth, takes your eye through the picture, and adds context. The sky, I don't know whether I don't think it's blown, because I think I can see detail throughout it, but I'd probably tone it down a little bit in post-processing just to get a bit more detail in the sky. It's on the edge of looking blown, but I don't think it is. I think you've got the photographer's got detail throughout in it. So I would probably try and get a bit more detail. It's on the edge there, I'd have thought. But yeah, it's one of those thought-provoking images, which with quite a lot going on, but a lot of interest, in it. And as I mentioned, it's a strong sense of place style picture.
Brilliant. Another water capture.
I know this waterfall well. Halfway up Swigacken, with the backdrop of, yes, it's one of my favourite waterfall spots on my workshops. What can I say? Yeah, I know this spot extremely well. Yeah, it's a nice long exposure shot. Processing looks to be, it's quite poppy. I think it's gone into, my guess is it's gone into what's the software that SilverFX is part of? Can't remember. It's quite a poppy look to the rocks, which isn't quite my style, because you can notice quite a strong edge to it. I'd personally probably tone that down quite a bit, or a little bit, shall I say. Apart from that, nice long exposure picture. It's about looking at the water. It's 4 or 5 seconds. There's no movement in the clouds, so it's not a particularly long exposure. Ooh, maybe a little bit longer. There's quite smooth water throughout it, actually. It might be about 10 or 15 seconds. Compositionally, I think personally it's one where if you can get the water, direct relationship of the water between and the mountains beyond, the eye is drawn to the not quite dead space, but you can see the proportion of the sky with the small small tree in the top right hand corner. It is space which I think doesn't add to the image. Generally, in this style of image, I would have a stronger direct relationship with the waterfall and the Kulin Mountains as a backdrop as well. The photographer's done well in keeping high. What happens in this location, if you go low down, too low down, the bank intrudes into on the other side, intrudes into the picture well. So the photographer's done well in terms of the height the picture's taken from, and I think got that about right. You can also take this image with a stronger fall right near the camera as well, and which tends to have more impact in the waterfall as well. There's quite a few different positions you can take this shot from, but all sorts of weather as well. It's a good sunrise spot. So a few things. I said processing to me looks a little bit strong for my taste, but we've all got different tastes, and certainly I would have a stronger, if I could, which you can, a stronger relationship between the waterfall and the mountains, and take that that dead sky space out of the shot at a preference.
Brilliant. Just what I remember, Nick Software, is that what we were looking for?
Ah, yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
that's it. That's the stuff. Yeah, that to me looks like Nick Software processing.
Yeah,
maybe wrong, but it looks like it.
Brilliant. Another black and white with the sheep again.
Oh, nice! Another nice sense of place shot. I like this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice shot, isn't it? Right. Yeah, it's one of those with a lot going on. Now I like central positioning. I do it a lot, and I like it. But I wonder whether in this case it feels right. There's so much interest in that backdrop of this image, with the mist over the mountains, the view into the valley. And what happens if you put something right in the middle of the frame, which often, like we saw in the previous black and white image, can work extremely well, and I do it a lot. Your eye tends to stop there. It sticks right in the center. So on this particular example, I would try and open up the view a bit, and open up the view down the valley to create more depth in the image. So that means shooting a bit more from the left-hand side. There is, however, in doing that, an issue there. You're taking the barn further to the right of the picture, so there's an element of compromise. I quite like the positioning of the barn there, of course, at the moment, but that relationship with the barn and the trees, while an interesting one, it's slightly difficult to manage. There's not, of course, anything you can do about it. They are where they are, and that is the view that you're looking down the valley. So we often have to work with what you've got. But on the whole, on balance, I think probably looking for a point of view which opened up, place the tree and the barn to the right of the picture a little bit more, and open up the landscape beyond would probably, to my mind, work more slightly more strongly. But I really like it. I say it's one of those nice sort of sense of place pictures as well, with quite a lot going on, but it's an interesting shot.
Brilliant. So sorry, here we go.
Right. Okay. There's a hint of mountains in the background, isn't there? Yeah, I think this is. I'm mainly looking at this one. I'm mainly looking at the bank with the different types of grasses on it. My eye almost wants to go to the left and explore the more subtle grasses in the water. What the interest, I think, is in the landscape, there is an interesting subtle effect of the mist, the landscape in the mist behind, and an interest definitely in the, is that frozen water? It's certainly well frosted, isn't it? In the grasses and the frosted water. So I think I would reduce the impact of the embankment in the picture and that tree growing on the embankment by taking that further to the right or even out of the frame, but of course without knowing where the photographer can get to, because with water there's clearly limitations and you don't know what's happening on the left hand side. So it could be getting further to the left is going to be difficult. But in an ideal world, I would probably open up the picture more, reduce or take away the effect of that the bank which currently dominates the picture, and increase the relationship between the grasses in the water in the foreground to the misty mountain backdrop. That's the way I would deal with that shot. If possible as well, if there is some of those interesting grasses closer to the edge of the water, then maybe using a wide angle low positioning shot to have strong foreground effect with the grasses and the water will work quite well as well. You obviously squeeze the foreground a little bit by doing that, turning it into a more of a single plane, but it is a compositional technique that can be really effective. But I'm saying this entirely without knowing exactly what access the photographer can get to this, because it could be, you know, it's surrounded by water all the way around and just simply can't get any further to the left.
Brilliant. Okay, we're back to some strong light in this one, mate.
Ooh, lovely light on this one. Yeah, fabulous light. I thought it was the Dolomites for a moment, but it's not, is it? Beautiful golden light. What can I say? I don't think I'd take any different. I don't think I would. Would I add a bit more sky? Give the mountains a little bit more context, possibly. So if it has been cropped, maybe add a little bit of sky in that. But apart from that, it's a beautifully captured golden dawn light, isn't it? Nice layering of mountains from foreground to background as well. Can I see a little? It's difficult to know whether the reddish colouring on. Oh, it's. No, it's. I think it's. Yeah, nice shot. A wider view as well. If the photographer has got a wider view, it would have been, you know, possibly worth interesting seeing that one as well, seeing more context. When I'm thinking more about it, when I'm taking this shot, on the whole, they do tend to be more contextual. These mountains, they really hit you in the face, and they're zoomed in with not too much space either side. So if the photographer's got an example of which has more context and space, then I think maybe that's probably the way I would have taken it. But having said that, and there's always a but on these, because there's often several angles to pictures. The sky is fairly empty, of course. The blue sky, what makes the picture is the quality of the light on the rocks, and clearly this composition accentuates that. So there's several different ways of looking at it.
Brilliant. Very strong image. Okay.
Ooh, nice one.
It's nice.
Yeah, like this.
Yeah.
Nice, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really nice.
Spot on. Yeah, the black and whites are good, aren't they? Yeah. Yeah, lovely use of long exposure. Look, it must be sharp. It must be sharp. It must be an image so carefully put together and beautifully taken must be sharp. Just doesn't. Maybe it's down to the resolution it's been uploaded to.
I think so. Definitely down here on mine. Okay. Obviously, I've got the live screen. Okay. It's definitely sharp at the base of the image.
Ooh, it's definitely. Okay. So yeah, lovely. The great use of the long exposure in the water, which has just picked out that feature at the end of the harbour harbour wall, whatever it is, perfectly well. Beautifully central position as well. So lovely shot. I've got nothing to say about it. You could make a case for toning down the light of the sky, but actually I quite like the flat bright tone of the sky as well. Counteracts draws the eye to the darkness in the background of the water. So yeah, excellent shot. Lovely.
Square, do you think?
You could do that one as a square or portrait. I think there's a few different crops which would work in that. I like the way it is, but you could certainly do that on several different crops.
I'd absolutely have that hung on my wall. That would be a feature on my wall without a doubt.
Yeah, great shot.
Thank you. So we've got some strong colour now. Nice coming up. So from one black and white to colour. Yeah. See what you think on this. I think it might be a little bit overdone. I'm not sure if it's the.
Yeah, possibly. Color-wise, the sky doesn't. It looks quite bluey. I often color correct skies. The camera can record them quite a bluish tone, and I will often neutralize the blue when it's a hazy sort of bluish effect, which I often try and neutralize. I think this is one which has been taken from a position where the photographers had an opening in trees. I would say has opened up a view, and obviously looks down the Lake District, possibly looks down the landscape. I think probably a crop which takes a bit of the foreground trees out might work. It is quite difficult with this kind of shot where you're limited for and I've been here myself, where you can see an interesting view, you can't quite get to an open view of it because there's too much as I love trees, sometimes they just get in the way. And really what you're looking for is an open landscape. So I think, and in this case, I think the photographer is probably slightly limited by the point of view or the positioning that they were able to access the shot from. And there's not a lot you can do because it is where you are, isn't it? Unless there are other open views. But quite a nice depth to it, nice view down the valley. It's quite a scenic kind of shot, isn't it? Yeah, because of the vegetation in the foreground, there's not an awful lot else you can add to it, apart from crop it a bit and just perhaps do more of a square crop, just contain in the center of the frame, maybe.
Brilliant. Another black and white.
Nice. Another nice black and white, isn't it? This might work quite well as a long exposure as well. Just, but equally, you can see with the reason for the short exposure as well. There's a nice sky texture to it. Ooh, you see, there are theories on number of subjects. You've got two here, which kind of complement each other. You've got the stronger one on the left-hand side and the more distant one on the right. I possibly have accentuated the difference in the scale between the two by going closer, if you can, but it's difficult to tell. Again, there might be water in the way, with a wider angle, which would have made the foreground one slightly bigger and the background one slightly smaller. At the moment, they're almost competing for attention. And of course, the other view is to get a position where you're only including one of them. With the foreground one, that's actually quite difficult to do. Although you could probably experiment with looking to the left-hand side rather than into the right. With the one in the background, clearly it's simpler to get that one in isolation. But the more interesting wreck is you could make a case for the more interesting wreck being the one on the left-hand side. So on the whole, two can work, but when they're of a similar impact and scale, they potentially can compete. Like the position of the horizon line, focuses on the sky. Again, a bit of vignetting wouldn't go amiss, draws the eye towards the frame. But the main question mark I think I would place on this one is you've got the two features of quite similar scale, which can be altered by changing that relationship between the two.
Yeah, that's great. So I love the capture of the cloud, the cloud formation and the different tones in that. I thought really added, really good. We got some more long exposure water.
Yeah. Yes, it's nice long exposure shot. Yeah, got some quite nice watery swirls in the center ground. It is one of those that's quite difficult to comment on unless you're able to know what alternative views there are. Possibly not so struck on the bank on the left-hand side, and maybe a little bit of thought on cropping, just focusing on.
Well, I've lost you, Nigel. Have you muted by accident?
Sorry, Jess J. How much did you lose?
Well, yeah, you started to talk about the bank on the left-hand side.
Oh, okay, right. I'll repeat that bit. Sorry, I just put my elbow on the mute. Yeah, I don't think the bank on the left-hand side adds to the image, but clearly what's in the foreground is a strong part of the image. I think maybe something which merely focuses on the again, without knowing the position the photographer is able to get to, on the swirls in the center ground and its relationship to the background might work. Now, I don't know without seeing the original file, but I'm wondering if the water in the background is blown. Can't see any detail in it on my screen, but it'd be worthwhile going back to the original file. I assume it's in RAW. Going back to the original RAW file and find out whether the details there. On the whole, waterfalls and sunshine are a really difficult combination. Water and sunshine is a really difficult combination, particularly if you've got the light coming from behind, as I think this is largely from behind, which can be tricky. So look at the post for processing and find out whether you've, because I think maybe there might be lost detail in the waterfall, in the water in the background. But the main thing, I think, I play around with composition, look how you can just get a purer, simpler picture by focusing more on the features on the right-hand side of the image instead of the embankment on the left.
Brilliant. The next image, Nigel, is going to take us exactly to the halfway point, and looking at the time, I think that's where...
Yeah, that's not bad timing, is it?
Yeah, we're spot on. So, guys, if you did join us late, because of the amount of images we've had in, and it's been fantastic, and thank you, we're going to continue this next week to make sure that all of your images are critiqued and given the same amount of time. We didn't want to rush through it by any standards on this. So if you haven't seen your images, then they will absolutely be featured in next week's. Of course, if you can't join us, we record all of our webinars and they're uploaded straight away or within the few days to the Academy. Right, let's get the next image up. So that's what we're going to finish with tonight.
Okay. Right, that is I know that spot as well. That's coming off Old Manor Store, isn't it, on Sky? And that's Loch Father in the background, I think. Right, great light processing. I think possibly needs looking at here. Now, whether the photographer has pulled light out where it didn't exist. There is an element. Be really interested to see the original RAW file on this one, because without doubt, the effect works okay in the foreground and the landscape, but there's an awful lot of posterization and artifacts in the sky which do definitely detract from the effect. I'd certainly, the processing doesn't work well in this one. But there is some interesting light there, and I'd like to see the photographer go back to the original file and see what is in there, because generally it's because you can tell there's some dark cloud, there's some interesting showers, there's showers around or something. There's a really interesting sky in that, and I'd like to see that that brought out in the image rather than almost take your eye away from it, because that processing does dominate the image much too much. But it's a great viewpoint. That it's got an interesting backdrop. You got a great view over, looking towards quite a lot of southern sky on that one, and it's quite a strong light effect and quite a strong landscape. But that processing does need looking at.
Brilliant. For me, I was just really distracted by this quite strong green line, where the color changes at the bottom of the image.
Yeah, you could tone that green down a bit as well. It's, I suppose, to my mind, my eye was caught so much by the effect on the sky that I sort of took my eye slightly away from the effect of the green, which otherwise made more prominent because that sky clearly needs looking at.
Brilliant. Okay, so right, so we've got a few questions. So I did, as I said, I hung on to them. So we did have confirmation through Google search that it was Seven Sisters, and some kind of Google, I didn't even know it existed, some kind of reverse angle view or something like that gave us confirmation. So
Okay.
so Seven Sisters it was, you thought it was, and the majority of people said it was. I think we touched on it at the time, but it was Nick's software we were talking about finishing, wasn't it?
It was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tell you what I picked up on, which I think was quite interesting, and I know you and I have discussed it. Obviously, we discussed landscape, and we've been doing this now for the last God knows how many weeks. You know that I personally favour a panoramic with regards to the landscapes, and I know there are obviously lots of different crops. I say in that I do like a square. If the
Yeah, I like square as well.
images right.
Underused.
One of the things that I picked up on tonight, which featured quite early on in quite a lot of the images, I think was the foreground. For me, you seem to pick up on it quite a lot as well, whereas we were seeing more of a fuller frame image, but the foreground almost being a real distraction because there was nothing to it. Is that quite common?
Absolutely. I mean, it comes back to my original thing where I say quite a lot, why am I taking this picture? If the foreground is a major feature and contributes, then accentuate it, focus on it, make it a key part of the picture. If actually the main interest is the center ground, the backdrop, whatever it happens to be, then think about how you can use the foreground or even take it out of the shot completely by either zooming in or choosing a point of view which takes the foreground out of the shot.
Brilliant.
Use it proactively rather than having it counting against you.
Excellent. And I don't know, and we said that right at the beginning of tonight that everything was about personal preference, which of course it is. I mean, you're a more than qualified teacher, we know that, but there's obviously a massive element in that. For me, we saw a lot of black and white tonight, which I love, and you know that I do. And I don't know, it could be the upload, and as I said at the beginning, I'm not on a calibrated monitor today. But I thought, personally, that in a lot of the cases of the images, I thought the black and whites could be a little bit stronger, a little bit more contrasty. I don't know if you felt that as well.
There were a couple of them that looked relatively flat, yeah. There were a couple of very contrasty ones, but there were a couple which looked a little bit flat and could certainly do with boosting a little bit, I would say, yeah. Yeah.
Brilliant. I'm just scanning. I think we asked the rest of the questions as we went, so we're pretty much good for time today, Nigel. So let's just repeat, guys. If you obviously, because we wanted to give you all the equal time, and we did reach the halfway point, which was brilliant. So we'll absolutely, and Nigel's more than happy to have already discussed it. And we'll continue.
We covered 24, did we, Jane?
Yes, we did.
Did you have 48?
Yeah, exactly. So so perfect timing, really. I think everybody got the right information on the image. It was a good timing, I think, perfect for us. So you've already said you're happy to. So we'll continue with the remainder images this at 5 o'clock next week. So I'll put the links up and everything for that. So again, hopefully you can join us live. If you can't, then the recording will be just after. Let me just. But the images, thank you guys. I was thrilled with the amount we had in, and
it was great,
and really strong as well.
There were a couple of fabulous black and whites in that.
Love
the one, the tree and the birds. Great.
Just perfect. Well, that and the pier head or whatever we said it was, they would both hang on my wall. I don't have any money, so don't try to sell them to me. But if I did have the money, I'd absolutely consider it. Or no space on my walls, to be honest, at the minute. But no, very well, good, brilliant. Thank you.